whenever I read anything about this film, the first sentence that I read tells me that it's a departure for you. But I wonder if that's how you see it.
Well, I think they made it the first good film I've made, which would be a departure. But no, I don't see it that way at all. I mean, I sometimes have to remind people that the first film I made was a 7-minute underground film called Transfer, and it was about a psychiatrist and his patient. So in a sense, it's coming full circle to do this movie. And I have to say that when I do a movie, I forget about the other movies that I did. They become irrelevant in terms of the project you're doing. And you forget them, and you just you listen to the particular movie that you're making, and it tells you what it wants, what its style is, and that's the way I work.
But is it true that you had been interested in making a film about Freud or about Freud and Jung for some time?
Well, it was really reading Christopher's play that unleashed that realization. So in a very Freudian sense, I can say it was an unconscious desire that got realized when I read Christopher's play.
And Christopher, can I ask you, we all think that it's a screenplay adapted from a play, but actually it started as a screenplay?
It started, yes, as a screenplay for 20th Century Fox in the 90s. And in the way of screenplays, nobody wanted to make it. So, there'd been a lot of work, a lot of research and so on. So I thought it seemed a pity to waste it. So I wrote a play, which fortunately did get done at the National Theatre in 2002. And I thought, that's great, that's that. And then a year or so later, I had a phone call from David. So I couldn't have been happier.
And can I come to you, Jeremy? I mean, we hear about your first script not being made. And you're known as someone who likes to take on challenging projects. How easy or difficult was it to get this film made?
Well, I thought, David is well known for body parts. And I thought, this is the brain. And why not make this film about the other body part that he's not actually touched yet? I mean, he uses it, but this was, it's within the work of David. And I thought, this is going to be wonderful to work on. And also for myself, I was going to, my own job, I was going to have a lot of enjoyment and knowledge given to me. So that was, one of the, well, obviously I was going to do it. I wanted to make a film with Christopher and David, but then I knew it would have a good life of its own.
Thank you. And I wanted to ask Viggo and Michael and Kira, of course you're playing not just historical characters, but certainly in the case of Freud and Jung, characters who we know quite a lot about. Is there a difference in terms of how you approach the historical characters? I'm thinking about, how much research you do or how you really get under the skin of those characters. Michael, you seem to be going first.
Ladies first, always, isn't it? Okay. Well, it's actually in a lot of ways easier because there is a biography that's at hand. There's a lot of material there written by, the person himself and also other people in and around and critiquing his ideas. So there's an awful lot of material there available that you usually have to do if you're building a fictional character. That's kind of what you do anyway, what the parents did for a living. It sounds really weird in my ears. Is that just me? Yeah. Maybe if I do this?
Yeah.
Anyway, what the parents do for a living, what the person was like as a child, popular, unpopular, sporty, academic, whatever. So you always have to build that picture together. So the information is there. Then there is the sort of pressure that you have a loyal following and people that feel very passionate and vocal. And so that's kind of pressure, and you respect that. And then you disrespect it because otherwise, you're not going to have the sort of courage to make bold choices and, and take decisions and not have to, worry about the consequences. You do as much research as possible. And then, what I really did was I just sort of, concentrated for the most part on the script available and what the story is that we're trying to tell in this slice of time in an hour and 40, an hour and a half, whatever that may be. And also try and get a handle on the muscle of the text, and you know, the sort of the rhythm of it. So treat it like a piece of music.
And Kira, can I ask you, because Sabina's known in psychoanalytic circles, but she's obviously not as well known as the other two characters. How did you approach finding out about her?
No, I'd never heard of her, and I'd heard about the play, but I'd never seen it. David offered me the part, which was incredibly exciting, and one of the first things I did was phone up Christopher, who I've worked with before, and say help. And I went round to his office, and he just gave me a pile of books and said, start reading. So I did, which was fabulous. I was lucky enough to meet a psychoanalyst who wrote a book called Sabina Spielrein, the Forgotten Pioneer of Psychoanalysis, which had some translations of Jung's notes about her and her diary entries. So I went to speak to her and worked a lot off that, which was very helpful. And David, of course.
Vigo.
Well, working with David again is one of the few truly nasty obligations I sense I have in life. He called, I said, well, all right. No, I actually, I don't know if I would have dared try it with someone else, but if David felt I could, you know, play the part and be in this story, then I would have been a coward and probably pretty foolish not to give it a try. It's a beautiful script, and I was nervous about it just because there's so much dialogue, and I don't usually get that much dialogue in movies. so it was somewhat daunting, but it ended up being really fulfilling to speak Christopher's words, to play with Michael, to play with Kira, to be with David again and his crew. I really enjoyed it. And as far as playing, I agree with Michael essentially that it's helpful that there's so much written by Freud, so much written about him, and I learned things about him that I might not have learned, you know, just in terms of how he was socially, you know, that he actually was quite personable, very charming, and had an excellent sense of humor, which I didn't realize, you know, until I'd studied some. So we had a lot of fun on the shoot, you know. As heavy as the material is at times, we had a good time. I'm very glad to be here.
Creatively, as I say, the other films don't help me make a new film. So when I'm asked a question like that, I have to step back and kind of be a critic and an analyst of my own work, which I think I'm capable of doing. It doesn't really help make the next one better, mind you. But I think what I think Freud did that was revolutionary was that he insisted on the reality of the human body, and particularly at in an era where the body was repressed, its bodily functions, sexuality, even physically, the way they dressed with those high, tight white collars, very stiff corsets for women and so on. And he was speaking about things that were considered quite, not just impolite, but unspeakable, which is why Sabina, at the beginning, we have her trying to speak, to say these things that were not to be spoken by a young woman. And so part of her wanted desperately to say those things, and part of her wanted to stop those things from being said or even understood by deforming the words, and that's where we sort of came up with the specifics of her performance. So yes, I think of Freud as an existentialist actually, and therefore I relate to that. And I think you could obviously, once you think of it that way, you can find connections with most of my other movies. No, I mean, to my surprise, maybe even not to my surprise, I mean, we will be going to Zurich eventually and show the film there, but it has been shown at the Zurich Film Festival, and that is a hotbed of Jungians, you know. There are more Jungian analysts there per square foot than anywhere else in the world, and they like the movie, you know. They like the movie. Freudians in New York love the movie. And even, I think, the acolytes of Sabina Spielrein, who are less than those, but are increasing in numbers, really appreciated the portrayal of Sabina, and really bringing her back to life was maybe the most startling part of this, because we feel there's a lot of material on Freud and a lot of material on Jung, but very little really on Sabina, but it's increasing. So, so far so good, I have to say.
It was sort of one of the most difficult things to find, really, because there were all these, everything that I read sort of says has hysterical fit or is ravaged by tics, and I kept on saying, okay, but what does that mean? You know, what is a hysterical fit? What are tics? So it was based on something that she wrote in her diary, which was that she saw herself as like a dog or a demon, which I thought was a horrendous thing to see yourself as, and I sort of felt that that was very important to show. I mean, we wanted it to be as shocking as possible. So working on that kind of vibe of being demonic or animalistic, I sat in the bathroom for a couple of hours and pulled faces at myself, and that was pretty much it.
Going out for drinks in Cologne with Kira was awfully complicated.